Hi, further to my video about advice for beginners. I decided I hadn't put much information on that video, in that video, about buying your first Melodeon, so that's what this video is all about. Okay, so this is probably your best starter Melodeon, in my opinion. This is a Hohner Erica in DG. So this row here is the G row, this is the D row, and over here you've got the basses, and this is a fettled example, so it's in good condition, plays perfectly, and it's not sort of too heavy, and that's a pretty nice first Melodeon. And at the time of doing this video, something like this would cost you around about £500, maybe a little bit more, maybe a tiny bit less, but certainly around that figure, so that's what you need to budget for. Okay, now your choices are between this and another Hohner model, which I'll show you now. Right, this is a Hohner pokerwork, so essentially internally it's much the same. As far as I know, it's exactly the same. The only problem with the pokerwork is it's got kind of sharper edges. See, it's squarer. The Erica is kind of, I don't know if you can see this, it's kind of rounder. See, rounded edges. This is pretty sort of fairly sharp, but they weigh, I think, pretty much the same. Possibly the pokerwork feels a little bit lighter, but anyway, Hohner pokerwork, Hohner Erica in DG, that's your best bet as a starter box. The nice thing about the pokerwork is that it has these mushroom buttons, these kind of flatter buttons which are easier to press on the bass side. On the Erica, the buttons for the bass are not so nice to press, so that's a consideration. So you're probably thinking, £500, that sounds like a lot of money for a beginner's Melodeon. Well, there are cheaper Melodeons available. There's quite a few Chinese made boxes with Italian sounding names. And I think there's one from Czechoslovakia called a Delicia or Delicia, but I couldn't honestly recommend them. I played them and they feel pretty stiff and horrible, and I think they're going to discourage you. The analogy I can make is when I used to be a guitar teacher, and beginners' guitars, some of them were absolutely dreadful, and I used to say to parents, you really need to buy your son or your daughter a fairly reasonable guitar, otherwise they're going to give up. And they would say to me, well, we don't want to spend a lot of money in case they do. It's kind of a catch-22. Anyway, that's my advice. Hohner Erica or Hohner pokerwork in DG to start with, but make sure it's fettled. You might remember in my other video I said don't buy from eBay because if the thing has got faults you might spend as much again or more getting it fixed. So where do you buy a box from? Where do you buy a Melodeon from? Well, my advice would be, if you're in England, to buy it from an experienced fettler, somebody who repairs and sells Melodeons for a living. I'm going to give you a few names here. Martin White is someone I deal with and I can thoroughly recommend him. He's like me in Essex. There's also Theo Gibb, who's up in, I think he's in the Newcastle area. Rhys Weston is in Wales. There's Mike Rowbottom, and there's Acorn Instruments, which are up north as well, run by a guy called Pete. I know they're highly reputable, and all those people will sell you something that's instantly playable, all fixed up, all tuned up. You can't tune a Melodeon yourself unless you know what you're doing, which is fairly unlikely, I'd say. So if it's got faults or it needs tuning, you're going to be in trouble. So buy one from one of those people. If you're in the US, there's a guy called Scott Bellinger, and I believe he's in New Jersey. I know he's a really good guy, and I've seen quite a lot of his videos and the Melodeons that he has for sale, so I think you could buy from him with confidence. These aren't the only people, there are others out there, but these are just the names that come to mind. You could buy a Melodeon from a music shop, but you might find that that shop doesn't have any expertise when it comes to Melodeons, so they might sell you something that they believe to be in, really good condition, and find that it's like an eBay purchase, it needs work doing to it. Even if it's new, Very often new Melodians need tweaking by a fettler. It doesn't mean to say because they're new they're going to be perfect, so be aware of that. Always try before you buy if you possibly can. Preferably take an experienced player with you so that they can put the thing through its paces to check for faults and check for tuning. You might be too shy to do that yourself, or you may not be able to do it because you can't play the thing. You might be an absolute beginner. So it's definitely worth taking a friend with you who can already play, and then that will avoid an inexpensive mistake. Sadly, playing the Melodeon is not like it was many years ago where the things were pretty cheap. It's a rich person's game now, I have to say. £500 is probably the least you should pay, and of course they go up to many thousands of pounds as you get into it. So be warned. Okay, can cost you a lot of money ultimately. And if you're a pretty healthy, strong person, there's nothing wrong with a Hohner Erica or Hohner Pokerwork as a starter box. But they are, or can be, a little bit stiff to play in my experience. So if you've got the money, you might stretch to a Castanari Lily like I showed you in my other video, which is a single reed per button instrument. So it's light, much lighter than the Erica or the Pokerwork, and it's much easier to play. Probably doesn't sound as nice because of that single reed. It sounds a bit more like a concertina, but that's a very lightweight instrument. But a second-hand one could cost you £900 at the time of doing this video. If you go for a new instrument, I should warn you that it will probably feel pretty stiff for a long while because the bellows won't have been played in. So these instruments need playing in over a period of years. So I would always recommend a used instrument for a beginner for that reason alone, and of course you can save yourself quite a lot of money in that way. Remember, just because you're paying a lot of money, that doesn't guarantee excellence. So like I said earlier in the video, make sure you try it out before you buy it. Avoid eBay and Gumtree like the plague. If you get some horrid wheezy box that's full of faults, you're going to pay a fortune to get the thing fettled, to get it fixed, because fettlers are few and far between, and quite rightly they charge a premium because not everyone can do it. You need specialist equipment, you need specialist know-how. So like I say, it could run into a few £100 getting something fixed up. Be wary of descriptions on eBay particularly, because a lot of people on there call everything with a set of bellows a concertina, or they'll call it an accordion. It might not be as described. You might find that what they've called a concertina is a Melodeon, or what they've called a Melodeon is a concertina. So make sure you study the pictures carefully before you set out. You should know that in other parts of the world, people call Melodians button accordions. Diatonic button accordion is another description for a Melodeon. Another possible source for Melodians could be people on Melnet, www.melodeon.net, often sell their Melodians, and there are quite a few respected players on there who you could be pretty safe with. You could buy from them and feel safe. For instance, I bought a Hohner Lilliput a few years ago from a guy called John Spires, who's a very well-known, very respected player of the Melodeon, and he sold me an instrument which was, as described. Okay, it wasn't in perfect condition, but it was in playable condition, and I factored into the price the fact that I was going to need to get it tuned, but it was exactly as described, and I was really happy with the purchase. So there are quite a few people on there who regularly sell instruments, and if you go on Melnet regularly, you'll get a feel for who those people are. So there we are, a bit of buying advice. What I've told you is not foolproof, but the fact is, if you follow my guidelines, you can't go far wrong. And if you're unsure about things, you can always put a post on Melnet. You have to join Melnet to do that, but put a post on there and ask questions, and you'll usually find a reply coming in within about half an hour. So that's a great way to find out what's going on with something you're looking at. I'm sure most people on there would probably say the same as I've done in this video. Anyway, if you haven't bought a Melodeon yet, this might have helped you make up your mind of how to go about it. I wish you lots of luck. Thanks for watching this video, and you'll see me in my next one.